Everyone has a breaking point. For Sarah, it wasn't the unpaid overtime, the stolen ideas, or the constant ridicule from the heirs of New York's elite. It was a rainy Tuesday in November on the 45th floor of the Callaway building when they locked the door and told her she wasn't leaving until she was on her knees. They thought she was just a scholarship kid from Ohio with a cheap suit and no connections. They didn't know who was on the other end of the phone in her pocket. They didn't know that the man they were mocking owned the very ground they were standing on. This is the story of how a single phone call turned a humiliation into a massacre. New York City doesn't care about your feelings, but Whitmore and Callaway, the city's most ruthless crisis management firm, actively preyed on them. Sarah Miller adjusted the collar of her blazer. It was polyester, bought off the rack at a department store in Ohio, and under the fluorescent lights of the 45th floor bullpen, it had a slight unnatural sheen. Around her, the office hummed with the quiet, expensive noise of cashmere brushing against mahogany and the click of manicured nails on glass keyboards. She was the charity hire. That's what Bradford Cunnington III called her. Bradford was the kind of guy who failed upward so consistently he had likely forgotten gravity existed. His father was on the board of directors, which meant Bradford spent his days loudly taking credit for work he didn't understand and terrorizing the interns. He was flanked always by Jessica Vane. Jessica was beautiful in a terrifying, jagged way, like a diamond that had been smashed. She was the senior associate who had decided on day one that Sarah was a stain on the firm's pristine aesthetic. "Miller!" Bradford's voice cut through the hum. He didn't look up from his phone as Sarah hurried over to his desk, which had a panoramic view of the Hudson River. "Yes, Bradford," Sarah asked, clutching her notepad. "My latte is lukewarm. Again." He finally looked at her, his eyes dead and bored. "I specifically asked for 145 degrees. Do you know what happens to the foam structure when it drops below 140? It collapses, like your career is going to if you don't learn to follow basic instructions." I picked it up 10 minutes ago, Bradford. The elevator bank was, excuses are for poor people." "Sarah," Jessica interjected, sliding her chair over. She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just go get another one, and this time use the corporate card." "Oh wait, you don't have one. Do you use your own cash? We'll reimburse you, eventually." They wouldn't. Sarah knew they wouldn't. She had already spent $200 of her own money this month on their errands, dry cleaning for Jessica's silk blouses, obscure protein powders for Bradford, and once a replacement charger for a laptop she hadn't even broken. Sarah swallowed her pride. She had to. This internship was the golden ticket. A recommendation from Whitmore and Callaway was the only way to secure a clerkship with a federal judge, which was the only way to get into the environmental law sector she actually cared about. She was playing the long game. "I'll get right on it," Sarah said, her voice steady. As she turned to leave, she heard Bradford snicker. "God, look at those shoes. Do they even sell those in this decade? It's like watching a golden retriever try to do calculus. She tries so hard." "It's tragic, really." Jessica's voice drifted back. "I heard her dad is some kind of farmer. Can you imagine coming from playing in the dirt to this?" Sarah froze for a microsecond near the glass doors. Her hand tightened on the door handle. A farmer. Technically, they weren't wrong. Her father, Harrison, did spend a lot of time in the garden these days. He liked growing tomatoes. He liked the quiet. He liked wearing flannel shirts and driving an old Ford truck that rattled when it hit 40 miles per hour. When Sarah had told him she got the internship in New York, he had just nodded, wiped dirt from his hands, and said, Just remember who you are, Sarah, and remember if the wolves circle, you don't run, you stand your ground. She hadn't told anyone at the firm who her father really was. She used her mother's maiden name, Miller. She wanted to make it on her own merits. She wanted to know that when she succeeded, it was because she was smart, not because of the weight of her last name. But as she stepped into the elevator, blinking back tears of frustration, she wondered if merit actually mattered in a place like this. The elevator dinged at the lobby. The security guard, an older man named Frank, tipped his hat. "Rough day again, Miss Miller." "Just the usual, Frank." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Hang in there. The cream rises to the top." Frank winked. Sarah walked out into the cold drizzle of Manhattan. She didn't feel like cream. She felt like sediment being ground down by the heavy stones of Bradford and Jessica's egos. The tension in the office had been escalating for weeks. There was a rumor that a massive merger was happening. Whitmore and Callaway was looking to be acquired by a shadowy global conglomerate called the Sterling Group. The partners were on edge. Everyone was trying to prove their worth. And for people like Bradford and Jessica, proving their worth didn't mean doing better work. It meant eliminating the competition. And Sarah, with her perfect scores from Yale Law, which she attended on a full scholarship, and her terrifyingly high efficiency rate, was competition. They just hadn't realized how dangerous she was yet. They saw the cheap shoes. They didn't see the mind. And they certainly didn't see the trap they were walking into. The incident happened 3 days later. It was a Tuesday, the kind of grey, relentless day where the sun never quite seems to rise. The firm was buzzing. Victor Callaway, the managing partner, and a man who terrified everyone, including his own children, was hosting a private viewing of his antique collection in the main conference room. The centerpiece was a Qing Dynasty vase, valued at over $250,000. It was sitting on a pedestal near the window, blue and white porcelain glowing against the grey sky. Sarah had been assigned to perimeter duty, basically standing in the corner and making sure no one touched anything while the caterers set up. The room was empty except for Sarah, Bradford, and Jessica. They had come in early, ostensibly to check the lighting, but mostly to gossip where the partners couldn't hear them. "My dad says the Sterling Group deal is practically done," Bradford was saying, leaning casually against a mahogany table. "Once the acquisition goes through, I'm in line for junior partner, skipping the associate phase entirely." "That's amazing, Brad," Jessica cooed, adjusting his tie. "You deserve it. You've been carrying this team." Sarah rolled her eyes internally. Bradford had spent the last week playing fantasy football while Sarah wrote his entire brief for the Anderson versus State Appeal. "Hey, Miller," Bradford called out. "Get me a sparkling water. San Pellegrino. Not that generic trash from the break room." "I can't leave the room." "Bradford," Sarah said, her hands clasped behind her back. "Mr. Callaway gave strict instructions. Someone has to be here with the collection at all times." Bradford laughed, a sharp, barking sound. He walked over to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and entitlement. "Mr. Callaway works for us, essentially. My dad owns a third of this firm. When I tell you to do something, you do it. Go." "No," Sarah said. The silence that followed was heavy. Jessica turned around, her eyes widening in delight. She loved blood sport. "Did you just say no to him?" Jessica asked, stepping closer. "I said I have orders from the managing partner," Sarah maintained, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Bradford's face turned a blotchy shade of red. He wasn't used to resistance. He reached out, grabbing a heavy crystal paperweight from the table. He tossed it in the air, catching it. You know accidents happen when people aren't careful, Bradford said softly. It would be a shame if something happened to this collection because the intern was negligent. Put that down, Bradford, Sarah warned. Make me. Bradford turned and feigned a throw toward the Qing vase. It was a mock gesture meant to flinch her, but he was clumsy. His expensive Italian leather shoes slipped on the freshly polished floor. The paperweight flew from his hand. It didn't hit the vase. It hit the pedestal. The pedestal wobbled. Sarah lunged forward, diving to catch the porcelain, but she was too far away. The vase tipped, slid, and fell. Crash! The sound was sickening. $250,000 of history shattered into 1,000 jagged shards of blue and white. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Bradford scrambled up his face, pale. Jessica gasped, her hand over her mouth. Then slowly a malicious smile spread across Bradford's face. He looked at Jessica. Jessica looked at him. They didn't need to speak. They came to an agreement in a split second. You clumsy bitch, Jessica whispered, her voice trembling with fake horror. What? Sarah stood up, brushing glass dust from her knees. Bradford threw the paperweight. I saw him. Who threw what? Bradford asked, his voice calm now. He picked up the paperweight and placed it gently back on the table. He took out a handkerchief and wiped it down. I don't see any fingerprints on this. Do you, Jessica? No, Jessica said, pulling out her phone. But I do see an intern who was jealous of our success. An intern who was told to leave the room but refused. An intern who threw a tantrum. You're crazy. Sarah backed away. There are cameras. In the conference room. Bradford laughed. No. Father hates being recorded during negotiations. The cameras are off. It's your word against ours, Miller. The word of 2 senior associates and the son of a board member against nobody. The door handle rattled. Someone was coming. Bradford moved fast. He grabbed Sarah's arm, his grip painful. Listen to me. You're going to fix this. I didn't do it. It doesn't matter. Bradford hissed. If my dad finds out I did this, I lose the partnership. I lose the trust fund. That's not happening. So here is how this goes. When Calloway walks in, you are going to be on your knees, picking up these pieces, and you are going to be begging for forgiveness. I won't, Sarah said, trying to yank her arm free. Oh, you will, Jessica said, moving to block the door. She locked it. The click echoed like a gunshot. Because if you don't, we won't just fire you. We'll blackball you. I'll make sure you don't even get a job as a paralegal in a strip mall in Jersey. We will ruin your reputation. We will sue you for the cost of the vase. You'll be in debt for the rest of your pathetic life. Sarah looked at them. They were monsters, but they were monsters with power. She thought of her student loans. She thought of the fragile career she was trying to build. She thought of the farmer dad she was trying to protect from her failures. Kneel, Bradford commanded, pointing to the jagged glass. Get on your knees and apologize for being a clumsy, incompetent waste of space. Please, Sarah whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Don't do this. Kneel, Bradford shouted, his face contorted. Kneel and beg, or I swear to God I will destroy you. The knocking on the door became pounding. Open up! What was that noise? It was Victor Calloway's voice. Last chance, Miller, Jessica hissed, trembling. Sarah looked at the door, then at the floor. The injustice burned in her throat like acid. Slowly, agonizingly, she lowered herself. Her knees touched the cold floor. A shard of porcelain pierced the fabric of her cheap trousers, cutting into her skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her head bowed. Bradford smirked. He took out his phone and snapped a picture. "Insurance," he muttered. Then Jessica unlocked the door. Victor Calloway burst in, followed by 3 security guards. He stopped dead, looking at the shattered vase, and then at Sarah, kneeling amidst the wreckage, tears streaming down her face. "My God," Calloway breathed. "My vase." "It was Miller," Bradford said smoothly, his voice filled with regret. "She was messing around, trying to take a selfie with it. We tried to stop her, but she knocked it over. She's just confessed. She's very sorry, Victor." Calloway's face turned purple. He looked down at Sarah with pure disgust. "Is this true?" Sarah looked up. She saw Bradford's smug face. She saw Jessica checking her nails, and something inside her, the part that had been trying to play nice, trying to be the good scholarship girl, finally snapped. She stood up. She ignored the blood on her knee. She ignored the tears. "No," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. "It is not true." "Excuse me," Calloway roared. "Get security to escort her out. You're fired, Miller, and expect a lawsuit by morning." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Sarah said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "Get her out of here," Bradford yelled, panic flickering in his eyes. "I have a phone call to make," Sarah said, her thumb hovering over a contact, saved simply as Dad. "And Mr. Calloway, you might want to hold off on that lawsuit until you speak to the man who is currently buying your company." Bradford laughed nervously. "Who, the farmer?" Sarah didn't answer him. She pressed dial. She put the phone to her ear. The room went quiet as the line rang once. Twice. "Hello, sweetheart," a deep, gravelly voice answered. The voice of a man who moved mountains. "Hi, Dad," Sarah said, locking eyes with Bradford. "I need you to come to the office. Now! Is everything all right?" The voice on the other end hardened. "No," Sarah said. "They made me kneel." There was a pause on the other end. A pause that felt like the air being sucked out of the room. When the voice returned, it was deadly calm. "I'm 3 blocks away. Don't move." And Sarah, "Yes, tell them to start packing." The silence that followed Sarah's phone call was heavy, suffocating. It hung in the air like smoke. Victor Calloway broke it first. He let out a short, incredulous scoff. "Buying my company? You really are delusional, aren't you, Miller?" He turned to the security guards, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. "Get her out, now, and throw her phone in the trash on the way out." "I wouldn't," Sarah said, slipping the phone back into her pocket. She stood tall, despite the throbbing pain in her knee where the shard of porcelain had cut her. "If you touch me, you're assaulting the daughter of the majority shareholder of the Sterling Group." Bradford Cunnington III burst out laughing. It was a loud, braying sound that bounced off the glass walls. "Oh, this is Rich, the Sterling Group. Your dad is a farmer, Sarah." "You told us yourself. He grows tomatoes. Does he have a diversified portfolio of corn and manure too?" Jessica Vane joined in, smirking. "This is pathetic, Sarah. Even for you. Trying to pretend your dad is Harrison Sterling. Harrison Sterling is a recluse. No one has seen him in public in 3 years. And he certainly doesn't have a daughter who wears that." She gestured vaguely at Sarah's outfit. "Grab her," Calloway snapped at the guards, losing patience. 2 burly guards in grey uniforms stepped forward. One of them reached for Sarah's arm. Ding! The elevator bell at the far end of the hall chimed. It wasn't the usual soft chime. It was the priority override chime, a sound usually reserved for emergency services or the building owner. Everyone froze. The heavy double doors of the main entrance, usually locked and requiring a keycard, slid open automatically. First came the sound. The heavy rhythmic thud of boots, not the click-clack of Italian leather soles, but the heavy purposeful tread of work boots. Two men in black suits walked out first. They were massive, wearing earpieces, their eyes scanning the room with military precision. They didn't look like office security. They looked like Secret Service. They took positions on either side of the elevator doors. Then he walked out. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of steel wool and a face weathered by wind and sun. He wasn't wearing a bespoke suit. He was wearing faded Levi's jeans, a plaid flannel shirt tucked in, and a brown canvas jacket that looked like it had seen better days. He held a baseball cap in his hand. He looked exactly like the farmer Sarah had described. Bradford snorted. "Is that him? Did he park the tractor in the lobby?" But Victor Calloway wasn't laughing. The blood had drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He took a staggering step back, his hand gripping the back of a leather chair for support. Mr. Sterling," Calloway croaked. Bradford stopped laughing. He looked from his boss to the man in the flannel shirt. "Victor, what are you talking about?" Harrison ignored them all. His blue eyes, sharp and terrifyingly intelligent, swept the room. They bypassed the shattered vase. They bypassed the terrified partners peering out of their offices. They landed on Sarah. He saw the dust on her clothes. He saw the tear in her trousers. He saw the thin line of blood trickling down her shin. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Harrison walked forward. The security guards who were about to grab Sarah instinctively backed away, sensing a predator. "Dad!" Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Harrison stopped in front of her. He reached out a rough, calloused hand and gently brushed a stray hair from her face. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," she whispered. "Just a scratch." "You're bleeding," Harrison said. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder. He turned slowly to face the room. Victor Calloway hurried forward, his hands trembling. "Mr. Sterling, we weren't expecting you. I had no idea. Sarah. Miss Miller. Is your—" "Miller was her mother's name," Harrison said, his voice cutting through Calloway's babbling like a knife. "She wanted to make it on her own. She didn't want my money. She didn't want my name opening doors for her. She wanted to learn the business from the ground up." Harrison turned his gaze to Bradford. Bradford was pale now, sweat beading on his upper lip. "And it seems," Harrison continued, "that she learned exactly what kind of business you run here." "Sir, this is a misunderstanding," Jessica Vane interjected, her voice shrill. She smoothed her skirt, trying to summon her usual charm. "Sarah, Miss Sterling." She was clumsy. She knocked over the Qing vase. We were shocked. We were trying to follow protocol." "Protocol." Harrison repeated the word as if it tasted bad. He walked over to the shattered vase. He looked at the pieces on the floor. Then he looked at the spot where Sarah had been kneeling. "You made her kneel," Harrison said. It wasn't a question. She insisted," Bradford blurted out. "She was so sorry she threw herself on the floor to pick it up." Harrison looked at Bradford. "You are Bradford Cunnington III, correct?" "Yes." Bradford straightened up, finding a shred of confidence. My father is on the board. He knows you. He speaks very highly of—" "Your father," Harrison interrupted, "is a leech, and you are a parasite." Harrison reached into his canvas jacket and pulled out a phone. It was an old model, durable and practical. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Sterling," a voice answered instantly on the other end. "Execute Clause 4 of the acquisition contract," Harrison said. "Immediate suspension of all executive assets pending an internal audit." "Done, sir." "And freeze the Cunnington accounts, all of them. Personal and business. If they want to buy a stick of gum, I want them to have to ask me for permission." "Understood." Harrison hung up. He looked at Bradford. "You were saying—" Bradford's phone buzzed. Then Jessica's. Then Calloway's. A chorus of notifications. "What did you do?" Bradford whispered, staring at his screen. "My credit cards. My access. I own the bank, son," Harrison said simply. "And as of 30 seconds ago, I effectively own this building. Now we are going to go into that boardroom, and we are going to watch the security footage." "There is no footage," Jessica cried out, desperate now. "Mr. Calloway turns the cameras off for privacy." Harrison smiled. It was a cold, wolfish smile. "Victor might turn his cameras off," Harrison said, "but Sarah knows better. And I know my daughter. She never walks into a snake pit without an antidote." He turned to Sarah. "You have it." Sarah reached into her pocket. "Every word." The main boardroom of Whitmore and Calloway was designed to intimidate. A 50-foot table made of black oak chairs that cost more than a Honda Civic, and a view of Manhattan that made you feel like a god looking down on ants. Today the gods were the ones sweating. Harrison Sterling sat at the head of the table. He hadn't taken off his canvas jacket. He looked entirely out of place, yet he dominated the space completely. Sarah sat to his right. A first aid kit had been brought in, and she was quietly cleaning the cut on her knee with an alcohol wipe. Victor Calloway sat to the left, looking like he was about to vomit. Bradford and Jessica sat opposite, huddled together like frightened children. Two of Harrison's security detail stood by the door, arms crossed. "Let's hear it," Harrison said. Sarah placed her phone on the polished black oak. She opened the voice memo app. The file was labeled Tuesday_conference_room. She pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. "Get me a sparkling water. San Pellegrino. Not that generic trash from the break room." Bradford's voice filled the room, dripping with arrogance. Calloway flinched. "I can't leave the room, Bradford." Mr. Calloway gave strict instructions. Sarah's voice. "Calm professional. Mr. Calloway works for us, essentially." Calloway whipped his head toward Bradford. "You said that, you little prick." It was taken out of context," Bradford stammered. Harrison held up a hand. "Quiet." The recording continued. The sound of the paperweight being tossed. The taunts. And then, the crash. "You clumsy bitch," Jessica's voice. "What Bradford threw the paperweight, I saw him." "Who threw what?" "I don't see any fingerprints on this. Do you, Jessica?" The faces of the accused went ashen. Jessica stared at the table, refusing to make eye contact. Bradford was breathing heavily, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. But the worst was yet to come. If my dad finds out I did this, I lose the partnership. So here is how this goes. When Calloway walks in, you are going to be on your knees. Kneel, kneel, and beg, or I swear to God I will destroy you. The recording ended with the sound of the door unlocking. Silence reclaimed the room. But this time it was the silence of a grave. Harrison Sterling didn't yell. He didn't flip the table. He simply leaned forward, clasping his rough hands together. "You know," Harrison began softly, "I grew up on a farm. Real dirt, real work. My father taught me that you judge a man by how he treats the animals that can't bite back. But in the city, you judge a man by how he treats the people he thinks have no power." He looked at Jessica. "You threatened to blackball her, to ruin her future, over a vase. I was just following Bradford's lead." Jessica wept, the tears real now born of terror. "Please, Mr. Sterling, I have a mortgage. You have nothing," Harrison said. "You're fired, effective immediately, and regarding that blackballing, I'm going to make sure every law firm in New York, London, and Tokyo hears this recording. You won't be filing briefs, Miss Vane. You'll be lucky if you're filing coffee orders." Jessica put her head in her hands and sobbed. Harrison turned his eyes to Bradford. "And you," he said. "My father will sue you," Bradford screamed, standing up. "You can't do this. Do you know who we are?" "Sit down," Harrison roared. The volume was so sudden, so powerful, that Bradford fell back into his chair as if shot. "I spoke to your father 5 minutes ago," Harrison said, his voice returning to that deadly calm. "He listened to the recording too. He's removing you from the family trust. He's stepping down from the board to avoid a scandal. You're on your own, kid." Bradford looked at his phone. It was dark, no messages, no support. He was alone. "But firing you isn't enough," Harrison said. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "You broke a piece of history. You tried to frame an innocent woman. You humiliated my daughter." He turned back. "The vase was valued at $250,000, Harrison said. "I'm buying the debt of this firm, which means, Bradford, you owe me $250,000. I don't have that kind of cash liquid," Bradford whispered. "Then you'll work it off," Harrison said. "But not here." Harrison looked at Calloway. "Victor, the acquisition is still on, but under new terms. Whitmore and Calloway will be restructured. Sarah will be the lead on the environmental law division, answering directly to the new board." Of course," Calloway nodded rapidly. "Whatever you say, Harrison. And as for these two," Harrison gestured to Bradford and Jessica, "get them out of my sight. Security." The two guards stepped forward. They hauled Bradford and Jessica up by their arms. The arrogance was gone. The expensive suits looked like costumes now. They were dragged out of the boardroom, their protests echoing down the hallway until the heavy doors slammed shut. Sarah looked at her father. "You didn't have to buy the company, Dad." Harrison smiled, the warmth returning to his eyes. "I didn't buy it for you, Sarah. I bought it because it was a good investment. Getting rid of the rot was just routine maintenance." He walked over and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's get that knee patched up properly. And then, I think you owe me a lunch. I hear the cafeteria here has terrible coffee." Sarah laughed, taking his hand. "I know a diner. They make great pie." "Lead the way, boss," Harrison said. As they walked out of the boardroom, Victor Calloway was still sitting at the table, staring at the empty chairs. He realized with a sinking feeling that the invisible girl in the cheap shoes had just become the most powerful person in the building. But the story wasn't over. Because when you cut off the head of a snake, the body still thrashes. Bradford Cunnington III was ruined, humiliated, and disowned. But he wasn't in jail. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of man there is. As Bradford was thrown out onto the wet pavement of Fifth Avenue, Stripped of his ID badge and his dignity, he didn't go home. He stood in the rain, watching the lights of the 45th floor. He reached into his sock and pulled out a second phone, a burner he used for less savory transactions. He dialed a number. "It's me," Bradford hissed, his eyes burning with hate. "I need a favor, a big one. I want you to look into a guy named Harrison Sterling and his daughter. I want to know where they live. I want to know where they sleep." "That's expensive, Brad," a raspy voice replied. "I can pay." Bradford lied. "Just find them. I'm going to make them wish they never walked into this city." 3 months had passed since the purge at Whitmore and Callaway. The firm had been rebranded as Sterling and Associates. The toxic culture of fear was gone, replaced by a rigorous high-performance environment that prioritized ethics. Sarah Sterling. She had finally embraced her name, though she still preferred Sarah, was working harder than ever. She wasn't just the owner's daughter. She was the spearhead of the new environmental division, winning cases against polluters that the old firm would have defended. But success breeds shadows. Sarah hadn't heard a whisper from Bradford Cunnington III or Jessica Vane. Jessica had moved back to Arizona, apparently working in real estate. Bradford had vanished. Rumors said he was in rehab in Malibu. Others said he was ducking creditors in Europe. Sarah wanted to believe he was gone. But sometimes when she walked to her brownstone in Brooklyn late at night, she felt eyes on her. A black sedan parked too long on the corner. A hang-up call on her private line. "You need a vacation," Harrison told her over the phone one evening. "The harvest is coming in. The air is crisp. Come home for the weekend." "I have the deposition for the Monsanto case on Monday," Sarah argued, rubbing her temples. "The case will be there on Tuesday," Harrison said firmly. "Your mother's apple pie won't be. I'm sending the jet. Be at Teterboro in 2 hours." Sarah smiled. It was hard to say no to Harrison. 6 hours later, Sarah was breathing in the cool, earthy air of Ohio. The Sterling farm was deceptive. From the road, it looked like a standard, albeit large, agricultural operation. Rolling cornfields, a massive red barn, and a sprawling white clapboard farmhouse. Locals knew Harrison was rich, but they didn't know he was billionaire rich. They just knew he paid his workers double the market rate and donated anonymously to the local library. But underneath the rustic charm, the farmhouse was a fortress. Bulletproof glass disguised as colonial window panes. A panic room hidden behind the wine cellar. Motion sensors in the cornfields. "It's good to have you back, kiddo," Harrison said, handing her a mug of cider on the back porch. They watched the sun set over the acres of drying corn. "It's good to be back," Sarah admitted, letting her shoulders drop. "New York is loud." "Loud keeps you sharp," Harrison said, "but silence is where you find out who you really are." They sat in comfortable silence as the twilight deepened into night. The wind rustled the dry corn stalks, creating a sound like whispering paper. "Dad," Sarah said suddenly, "do you ever worry about retaliation?" Bradford was unhinged. Harrison took a sip of his cider. "A man like Bradford is a firecracker. Loud, dangerous if you hold him, but he burns out quick. He doesn't have the stamina for a long war." Harrison was usually right. But that night he was wrong. Bradford hadn't burned out. He had smoldered. Half a mile away, crouched in the drainage ditch that ran parallel to the county road, Bradford Cunnington III watched the farmhouse through a pair of cheap binoculars. He didn't look like a New York socialite anymore. He had lost 30 pounds. His eyes were sunken and manic, rimmed with red. He wore dirty cargo pants and a black hoodie. He had spent the last of his hidden cash reserves paying a private investigator to find this place. He had sold his Rolex to buy a rusted pickup truck and a Sig Sauer P320 pistol with the serial numbers filed off. He watched Sarah and Harrison on the porch. He saw the warmth, the comfort, the wealth. "You took everything," Bradford whispered to the darkness, his voice cracking. "My trust fund, my reputation, my life. You think you can just sit there and drink cider while I eat out of garbage cans?" He wasn't thinking rationally. He didn't have an exit strategy. He just had a goal. Hurt them. He checked his pocket, a lighter, a rag. And in the bed of the truck parked down the road, 3 canisters of gasoline. The wind picked up, blowing toward the house. Bradford smiled, a jagged, broken smile. "Let's see how well you kneel when your kingdom is burning," he muttered. He waited until the lights in the house went out one by one. He waited until the only light came from the moon. Then he moved. He didn't go for the house too much security, he assumed. He went for the barn. The barn was massive old timber, dry as a bone, and it was connected to the house by a covered wooden breezeway. If he lit the barn, the wind would carry the flames straight to the main house in minutes. Bradford crept through the cornrows, the dry leaves masking his footsteps. He reached the back of the barn. He poured the first canister of gasoline onto the old wood. The smell was pungent, sharp. He poured the second. He was shaking. Adrenaline and madness were a potent cocktail. He clicked the lighter. Flick. The flame danced in the dark. A tiny yellow thing. "Goodbye, Sarah," he whispered. He dropped the lighter. The roar was instantaneous. Gasoline on dry timber is not a slow burn. It is an explosion. The back wall of the barn went up in a sheet of orange fury. The heat was immediate, blistering. Inside the farmhouse, Sarah was asleep in her childhood bedroom. She was dreaming of the ocean. But the sound of the ocean changed, becoming a deep, guttural roaring. Beep, 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 beep. The fire alarm shattered the night. Sarah bolted upright, heart pounding. "Dad!" She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her robe. She smelled it instantly. Acrid smoke, burning wood. She ran into the hallway. Harrison was already there. He was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, but he held a pump-action shotgun in his hands. His face was stone. "Fire," Harrison said, his voice calm but urgent. "Get to the front door, now." "The sprinklers." "The barn is fully involved," Harrison said, glancing out the window where an orange glow was pulsing against the glass. "It's spreading to the breezeway. We have to get out." They ran down the stairs. The heat was already penetrating the walls. The kitchen was filled with a hazy smoke. Harrison kicked the front door open. They stumbled out onto the front lawn, coughing. The scene was apocalyptic. The massive red barn was a tower of flame, sending sparks high into the black sky. The heat was intense enough to scorch the skin from 50 feet away. The wind was whipping the flames toward the house. "My truck." Harrison pointed to his Ford F-150 parked in the driveway. "Keys are in it. Move." "Where are you going?" Sarah grabbed his arm. "I have to shut off the propane tank behind the house, or this whole county goes up," Harrison yelled over the roar of the fire. "I'm coming with you. No, get in the truck and call 911. Harrison turned to run toward the side of the house. Bang! A gunshot cracked through the air. Dirt kicked up near Harrison's feet. Harrison dropped to a crouch, instantly leveling his shotgun. Sarah screamed, ducking behind the engine block of the truck. "Did you think it would be that easy?" A voice screamed from the darkness of the cornfield. Bradford emerged from the shadows. The firelight illuminated him like a demon. He was holding the pistol with both hands, shaking violently. He was standing near the edge of the driveway, blocking their exit. "Bradford!" Sarah gasped. She barely recognized him. He looked like a skeleton wearing clothes. "Look at you!" Bradford shrieked, waving the gun. "Running like rats. How does it feel? How does it feel to lose everything?" "Bradford, put the gun down," Harrison yelled, his voice booming. He didn't raise the shotgun. He held it at his hip, assessing the distance. "You're making a mistake. The mistake was yours." Bradford fired again, wildly. The bullet shattered the windshield of the truck. Sarah covered her head, glass raining down on her. "I was a partner. I was royalty." Bradford was crying now, stepping closer. "You made me a joke. I can't even get a job parking cars. Everyone knows. You ruined me." "You ruined yourself," Harrison said, his voice dropping an octave. "I just turned on the lights." "Shut up." Bradford aimed the gun at Sarah. "Get out from behind the truck. Get on your knees, now. Do it like you did in the office." Sarah's breath hitched. She looked at the gun. She looked at her father. Harrison was 20 feet away from Bradford, too far to rush him. "I said kneel!" Bradford screamed, cocking the hammer. Sarah stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was strangely clear. She remembered what her father had told her in the garden. "If the wolves circle, you don't run. You stand your ground." She stepped out from behind the truck. The heat from the barn was searing her back. "I'm not kneeling, Bradford," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I'll kill you." "Then do it," Sarah said, staring him in the eyes. "But know this, you pull that trigger and my father won't just kill you. He will erase you. You won't even be a memory." Bradford hesitated. The sheer audacity of her defiance confused him. He expected begging. He expected tears. He didn't expect the steel spine of a sterling. That split second of hesitation was all Harrison needed. He didn't shoot. He didn't have to. From the darkness behind Bradford, a shadow moved. It wasn't a person. It was Buster. Harrison's 140-pound Rottweiler, who usually slept in the mudroom, had been let out the back door when Harrison exited. Buster had been circling the perimeter, silent as a ghost trained for exactly this moment. "Buster, fass!" Harrison barked the command in German. The dog hit Bradford like a freight train. Bradford screamed as the massive jaws clamped onto his gun arm. The pistol flew into the grass. Bradford went down hard, the dog pinning him to the earth, snarling inches from his face. Harrison was there in 2 strides. He kicked the gun away. He placed his boot on Bradford's chest, pressing down hard enough to crack a rib. "Call him off! Call him off!" Bradford shrieked, sobbing in terror. "Stay!" Harrison commanded the dog. Buster froze, still growling, his teeth bared at Bradford's throat. Harrison looked down at the weeping, broken man. The fire raged behind them, consuming the barn. But the house was safe. The sirens were audible now, in the distance, blue and red lights flashing against the trees down the road. Sarah ran over, trembling. She looked at Bradford, then at her father. "Are you okay?" Harrison asked, not taking his eyes off Bradford. "I'm fine," Sarah said. She looked down at Bradford. He looked pathetic. The monster of the 45th floor was just a sad, broken boy in the dirt. "You wanted me to kneel," Sarah said softly. "Look at you now." Bradford just sobbed, defeated. The police cruisers skidded into the driveway, gravel flying. Officers poured out, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon," they yelled at Harrison. Harrison calmly placed the shotgun on the ground and raised his hands. "The threat is neutralized. The dog is under control." As the officers rushed in to cuff Bradford, hauling him up from the dirt, he looked back at Sarah one last time. There was no hate left in his eyes, just emptiness. They dragged him to the cruiser. The firefighters arrived moments later, dousing the barn with foam and water. They saved the breezeway. They saved the house. An hour later, Harrison and Sarah sat on the tailgate of the paramedics' ambulance, wrapped in shock blankets. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion. "He's going away for a long time," Harrison said, watching the police lights. "Attempted murder, arson, possession of an illegal firearm. He won't see daylight for 20 years. Sarah nodded. She took a sip of water from a plastic cup. She looked at the charred skeleton of the barn. "He tried to burn us down," she whispered. "He tried." Harrison put his arm around her. "But barns can be rebuilt. Wood is cheap. Roots are what matter. And our roots are deep, Sarah. He couldn't burn those if he tried." Sarah rested her head on her father's shoulder. She thought about the high-rise in New York. The glass walls, the fake smiles, the fragility of it all. And then she looked at the smoking ruins of the barn, the mud on her boots, and the steady, unbreakable presence of her father. She realized then that the girl who had knelt in the office was dead. She had burned up in the fire. The woman who remained was a Sterling. "Dad." "Yeah. I don't think I want to go back to New York on Monday." Harrison squeezed her shoulder. "Take the week. We have a barn to rebuild." 6 months later. The scaffolding was finally coming down off the new barn. It was built of sturdier stuff this time, steel beams clad in reclaimed oak. It looked traditional, but underneath it was indestructible. Sarah stood in the driveway, holding a blueprint. She wasn't wearing a polyester suit. She was wearing jeans work boots and a windbreaker with the Sterling and Associates logo on the breast. She split her time now 3 weeks in New York, running the firm 1 week in Ohio, grounding herself. The legal world had changed. The fall of Whitmore and Callaway had sent ripples through the industry. The Sterling Doctrine, as legal blogs called it, had become a new standard. Verify your sources, treat your staff with dignity, and never assume the person you're stepping on can't break your leg. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Frank, the old security guard from the lobby of the Callaway building. "Morning, Miss Sterling." Frank's voice was cheerful. "Just wanted to let you know the renovation on the 45th floor is done. The glass walls are gone. It's open concept now. Sunlight everywhere." "Thanks, Frank." Sarah smiled. "And Frank. You can drop the Miss Sterling. It's Sarah." "Old habits, boss. Oh, by the way, you have a visitor. Someone asking for a job. Says he knows you." "Who is it?" "Says his name is Victor. Victor Callaway." Sarah paused. Victor. The man who had watched her kneel. The man who had been ousted by his own board after the scandal broke and the clients fled. "He says he's desperate," Frank continued. "No one will hire him. He's asking if you need anyone in mail distribution." Sarah looked out at the cornfields. She watched her father Harrison driving the tractor in the distance, a trail of dust rising behind him. She thought about revenge. She thought about how good it would feel to tell Frank to kick Victor out onto the street. But then she looked at the new barn. You don't build something strong by using rotten wood, and you don't build a legacy by holding on to poison. "Tell him to come back on Monday, Frank," Sarah said. Really? Frank sounded surprised. You're gonna hire him? If he's willing to work in the mailroom, he can work in the mailroom, Sarah said. Everyone deserves a chance to start from the bottom. Maybe he'll learn something down there. Just make sure he knows the coffee runs are on him. She hung up. Harrison parked the tractor and walked over, wiping grease from his hands. He looked at the barn, then at Sarah. You look happy, he observed. I am, Sarah said. Did you hear about Bradford? Harrison asked quietly. The plea deal? Yeah. 15 years. No parole for at least 10. Sarah nodded. It didn't bring her joy. It just felt like a closed book. A chapter of her life that was finally completely over. He forgot the most important rule of nature, Harrison said, looking at the soil beneath their boots. You can burn the crops, you can smash the vase, but as long as the roots are good, the life comes back. Sarah took her father's arm. Come on, old man, I'm buying lunch, and no, we are not going to the diner. Why not? Harrison feigned outrage. Because I learned how to bake that apple pie, Sarah grinned, and I think mine is better than Mom's. Harrison laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed across the fields. Now that, he said, is a bold claim. Let's go test it. They walked toward the farmhouse, the gravel crunching under their boots. Behind them, the new barn stood tall against the blue sky, solid and unshakable. Sarah Miller had walked into a glass tower as an invisible girl. She walked out as Sarah Sterling, a woman who knew exactly who she was. She didn't need a name tag. She didn't need a title. She had the one thing they could never take away. She had the ground she stood on. And that is the story of Sarah and the phone call that changed everything. It's a reminder that true power isn't about the corner office, the expensive suit, or the ability to make others feel small. True power is quiet. It's the calloused hands of a father who protects his family. It's the dignity of standing your ground when the world tries to force you to your knees. Bradford and Jessica learned the hard way that when you judge someone by their shoes, you miss the strength of their stride. They thought they were crushing a grape, but they were actually planting a seed that grew into a forest that swallowed them whole. In a world full of Bradfords, be a Harrison. Be the person who builds, not the one who breaks. And never ever underestimate the quiet girl in the back of the room. She might just own the building. If this story fired you up, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. What would you have done if you were Sarah? Would you have hired Victor Calloway back, or would you have left him on the street? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. I'll see you in the next story.